You close your eyes and are carried away into a sleep from which you will never awaken. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? The idea that one of nature's most formidable forces grants its victims such a serene end, as if apologizing for its harshness. Now forget everything you just imagined. What if this whole blissful picture is nothing more than a dangerous delusion? A facade concealing one of the strangest and cruelest tricks our minds can play on us in our final moments. What if this restful sleep is not a mercy of nature, but a complex performance staged by your own mind on the threshold of oblivion? A grandiose illusion, the ending of which is written not with peace, but with panic, chemical chaos, and actions that not only defy logic, but are the very opposite. This deception has led rescuers and investigators for decades to discover scenes in the icy wastes that seem to have been ripped from a surreal nightmare. We intend to prove to you that the reality of death from cold is far more complex, terrifying, and mysterious than is commonly believed. This is not a story about the body falling asleep. It is a story about the mind going mad. So, we have established that the serene snow dream is merely a beautiful facade. Now let's look behind the scenes of this illusion and confront the first, most important question, which turns the tragedy into a sinister mystery. Imagine yourself as a rescuer or police officer responding to a call in a deep winter forest. Meter-deep snowdrifts surround you, a piercing wind rages, and the temperature has long since dropped to critical levels. And then you find a body. All signs point to the person being a victim of the elements, simply frozen to death. But something is wrong here. Something so strange and frightening that it defies all common sense. The person is naked. It's not just his jacket that's unbuttoned. He could be in his underwear, or naked in the middle of the icy desert. His belongings, which could be his only chance for salvation, are lying nearby. Sometimes they're scattered, and sometimes, even more eerily, they're neatly stacked nearby. A preliminary examination reveals no signs of a struggle or violence. This isn't a robbery or a murder. This is something else. Something that makes even the most seasoned professionals shake their heads in disbelief. This phenomenon isn't a figment of the scriptwriter's imagination or an anomaly that happened one day. In forensic science, it has a clear and frightening name: paradoxical undressing. According to various studies, between 20 and 50% of all hypothermia victims are found in this state. All over the world, from alpine meadows to the Siberian taiga, rescuers encounter the same inexplicable phenomenon. You may have heard of this phenomenon in the context of one of the darkest mysteries of the 20th century, the death of the Dyatlov group in the Urals, where some of the hikers were found barefoot and naked in the bitter cold. This paradox has baffled police for years, leading them to investigate theories of assault, secret military tests, or even encounters with the supernatural. The mind refuses to accept that a sane person could do such a thing to themselves. This is the first physical evidence that something unimaginable happens to consciousness in the final moments of life. Let's pause for a second and simply consider the essence of what's happening. The primary instinct of any living being, hardwired into us at the deepest reptilian level of the brain, is the instinct for self-preservation. When we're cold, we instinctively seek warmth, bundle up, huddle, and do everything possible to conserve precious energy. Our bodies are incredibly complex mechanisms, honed over millions of years of evolution for survival. So why, oh why, would someone whose body is literally screaming to conserve every last bit of warmth commit an act that is guaranteed to kill them quickly? Is this an act of madness, a last-ditch hallucination, or some kind of systemic glitch that forces us to act against our own nature? To answer this question, we must rewind time to the moment when the person is still conscious and desperately struggling. Before the mind descends into this pre-death chaos, the body enters a furious, brutal, and entirely logical battle for life. And this battle has nothing to do with a quiet decline. We left our hypothetical traveler at a moment when their mind was still clear, but their body was already confronted with an inexplicable paradox. To understand how the brain arrives at such irrational orders, we must see where it all begins. And it begins not with silence and peace, but with a deafening siren blaring within your body. As soon as your core temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius, the hypothalamus, our internal thermostat, declares all-out war. Your body is a fortress, and its walls are besieged by a merciless cold. The first order from the command center is to batten down the hatches. This process is called vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your arms, legs, and skin reflexively constrict, cutting off the warm blood flow to the periphery. It's a cruel but logical military triage. The body sacrifices its limbs, its outer provinces, to save the citadel, its heart, lungs, and brain. You feel your fingers turning to wood, your skin turning pale, and your lips turning blue. But it's not just numbness. It's a deep, aching, icy pain, as if your bones are being crushed in a vice. This is the first price you pay in this battle. But the enemy continues to advance, and a simple retreat is no longer enough. The fortress must return fire. And then the body unleashes its most powerful, most desperate, and energy-consuming weapon: shivering. Forget the slight tremors that come with a bit of a chill. Hypothermic shivering is something else entirely. It's a powerful, uncontrollable convulsion of the entire body. Your muscles begin to contract and relax at an incredible rate in a desperate attempt to generate heat through friction. Your teeth chatter so loudly it feels like they're about to shatter. Speech becomes nearly impossible. Every muscle in your body screams with tension and fatigue, as if you're running a marathon non-stop. This scorched earth tactic burns through your energy reserves, your glycogen, at a terrifying rate. And the scariest part is that your mind is completely clear. You're a prisoner in your own body, writhing in agony, and you're fully aware of the pain, the fear, and the direness of your situation. There's no serenity at this stage. It's pure, primal struggle, furious and brutal. So, let's recap the first stage. Pain, exhaustion, fear, complete and utter awareness of what's happening. The body is in a state of maximum stress, using all its resources to survive. There's not a drop of the ease or rest that myth speaks of. This is war in its purest form. But this fierce battle cannot last forever. The fuel for shivering runs out. Defense systems are exhausted. And when the body's temperature, despite all efforts, continues to drop below 32 degrees, something new and far stranger happens. The enemy breaks through the outer fortifications and reaches the very command center. The brain, the main commander of this battle, itself begins to freeze. And then logic retreats. Rationality falls silent. And ghosts enter the picture. The chemical reactions of the dying brain. which give rise to the very myth of a quiet and easy death. The battle for life is over. The battle for reality begins. The fierce battle we spoke of is lost. The body has exhausted all its resources in a desperate attempt to warm itself. And now the cold reaches the citadel. The brain, the courageous commander who gave orders and directed the defense, itself becomes a victim of the enemy. As its temperature drops, metabolism and oxygen consumption plummet. Neurons begin to transmit impulses more slowly, more reluctantly. Thoughts become viscous as tar, memories become jumbled, and the ability to reason vanishes. And then the first great deception occurs. The trembling stops. For the freezing man, this feels like a tremendous relief. The agonizing convulsions that had been racking his body finally subside. But this is not victory. It is complete and utter surrender. The brain is so frozen that it can no longer send the signal to the muscles to contract. The man begins to mumble incoherently. His movements become clumsy. He stumbles and falls. He no longer comprehends the full gravity of his situation. The war is over, and a strange, ringing silence descends on the battlefield. But the brain doesn't simply shut down. In its death throes, it does something astonishing. It opens its internal pharmacy and injects a powerful chemical cocktail into the bloodstream. In response to the unbearable stress and pain experienced in the first stage, the body releases a massive dose of endorphins, our natural opiates, similar in effect to morphine. This is a defense mechanism, the system's last attempt to protect itself, from unbearable suffering. And the effect of this cocktail is stunning. The pain that recently tore the body apart simply disappears. The chilling terror that paralyzed the mind dissolves. In its place comes a wave of irrational, almost blissful calm. The world around loses its sharp, hostile contours. Apathy sets in, but a pleasant, calming apathy. Some survivors describe this state as a feeling of mild intoxication or deep meditation. This is that very warmth within the cold, a subjective sensation of comfort that has nothing to do with objective reality, where the body continues to rapidly die. It is at this stage that the myth of an easy death is born. The person no longer struggles. They are not afraid. On the contrary, he might be fine. He feels safe, engulfed in euphoria and an overwhelming desire to sleep. It's the lullaby of hypothermia, a sweet whisper, coaxing you to simply lie down and rest in your snowy bed, forgetting all your worries. In this state, the idea of rescue seems like an unnecessary fuss. Why go anywhere? Why fight? When right here and now is so peaceful. It seems like this is the very serene departure the legends speak of. But this deception is only a prelude, because when the victim is already completely immersed in this false bliss, their failing brain prepares one last, most insane and shocking trick. A trick that will force her to do the unthinkable and finally reveal the mystery of those very naked bodies that began our investigation. We left our traveler in the embrace of false euphoria, in a quiet and serene world created by the chemistry of his own dying brain. It seems that the story is nearing its tranquil conclusion. But beneath this mask of calm, the final, most spectacular systemic catastrophe is brewing. The hypothalamus, our internal thermostat, which until this moment had first fought furiously and then simply switched off, finally fails. It doesn't just stop working, it breaks down. And this breakdown sets off a chain reaction which is the key to solving the paradoxical undressing. Remember that very first stage, shivering and rage, when the body constricted the peripheral blood vessels to retain heat in the center? Well, the tiny muscles that had been heroically carrying out this command all this time are simply paralyzed and give up due to the total hypothermia of the nervous system. The order to hold the line is no longer received, and they relax. All the floodgates that had been holding back the blood flow are thrown wide open. And then something happens that seems impossible and defies all the laws of survival. The dams collapse. All the warm blood that the body had so desperately and for so long preserved in its citadel around vital organs rushes back in one powerful, uncontrollable torrent to the frozen skin and extremities. Imagine pouring almost hot water on severely frostbitten hands. The pain would be unbearable. Now multiply this sensation 1,000-fold and spread it throughout the entire body. The icy nerve endings in the skin, already nearly dead, suddenly receive this hot rush. In their death throes, they sent chaotic, distorted, panicked signals to the brain. And for a dying, illogical mind, this isn't a signal for warmth. It's an unambiguous and irrefutable signal of a fire. The person doesn't feel hot. From their perspective, they're burning alive. This phenomenon, known as vasodilation, is that rush of fire, the final, most brutal hallucination the brain gives itself. Now put yourself in their shoes. You're in a state of euphoria. Your mind is clouded. And suddenly, you're engulfed in an all-consuming, unbearable flame. What will you do? You'll try to save yourself. You'll try to tear off everything that holds back this hellish heat. At this moment, clothing, instead of a savior, instantly transforms into the main enemy, a red-hot suit of armor. In a clouded state of consciousness, the person begins frantically undressing, sincerely believing that this will save them from the fire. They don't realize that in reality, they're only hastening their death, releasing the last remnants of precious warmth into the icy air. Here it is, the answer to the riddle. The mystery of the naked bodies, which has baffled investigators for so long, is solved. But don't jump to conclusions, because immediately after this fiery surge, at the very bottom of fading consciousness, an instinct awakens, even more ancient, primal and strange than the fear of fire. An instinct that drives victims to do something even more mysterious. So, we've solved the mystery of paradoxical undressing. A fiery mirage, generated by a dying brain, compels a person to tear off their clothes in a desperate attempt to escape the non-existent flames. It seems that the main question we posed at the beginning has been answered, and that's where the strangeness should end. But when rescuers examine the scene of a tragedy, they often find something even more mysterious. The bodies of victims are rarely found lying out in the open. Instead, they have been observed to materialize in the most unanticipated and inaccessible locations. In response to the crisis, people sought refuge in various locations, including under low spruce branches, in snowdrifts and in closets, under beds, or behind furniture in abandoned houses. These individuals have been observed to take up residence in confined spaces that appear to offer minimal protection from the inclement weather, particularly for individuals who are unclothed. This behavior is perplexing. Why would they, after divesting themselves of their attire, expend their remaining energy in attempting to crawl to a concealed location? This action is devoid of any human logic, but it holds the key to understanding the most ancient mechanism of our brain. This final, desperate act also has its own scientific name: terminal retreat, or last burrow syndrome. To understand its nature, one must understand one terrifying thing. By this point, the part of the brain that makes us human, the neocortex, responsible for personality, logic, self-awareness, and rational thinking, is already effectively dead. It has shut down due to critical hypothermia. Consciousness, as we know it, has faded. But the most ancient part of our brain, the brain stem, continues to function. This is our legacy from distant ancestors, our reptilian brain, responsible for the most basic reflexes: breathing, heartbeat, and primal instincts. And this ancient computer, sensing the imminent and complete shutdown of the entire system, launches the last, most basic survival program, encoded in our DNA millions of years before we became human. Find shelter. Hide. This is the same instinct that drives a wounded or freezing animal to seek a den, hole, or lair to die in safety, away from predators. This isn't a conscious decision. It's a pure, unadulterated reflex, emanating from the very depths of our being. At this point, a person is no longer quite human. They are a living organism, controlled by an ancient program that doesn't understand that the threat comes from within, not without. It's a final, touching, and utterly futile attempt to protect themselves, to hide from the world at a moment of maximum vulnerability. Now we have a complete picture of this strange behavior: euphoria, false fever, undressing, and, finally, the search for a hole. We've analyzed the mechanics of this process and traced the cascade of system failures. But what truly goes on in a person's mind at these moments? What do they feel when their body and mind betray them in the most incomprehensible ways? To peer into this abyss, we need witnesses. We need the voices of those who have come to the very edge and managed to return. We have followed a shocking chain of physiological failures: a desperate struggle, euphoric surrender, a fiery mirage, and a primal sheltering reflex. But all this is an outside perspective, an attempt to reconstruct events based on circumstantial evidence and scientific data. To truly understand what goes on in the human mind, we need a guide. Someone who has peered into this icy abyss and by some incredible chance managed to return. And such witnesses exist. Their stories are the most valuable and most terrifying proof of how real the brain's deception is. Almost all of them begin the same way, with a long, agonizing struggle. The pain in numb limbs becomes unbearable. Trembling drains the last of one's strength, and fear and despair reach their peak. And then, everything stops. The pain goes away, not dulled, but vanished, as if an invisible switch had been turned off. Panic gives way to complete, almost unnatural calm. It's at this moment that reality dissolves. While the body continues to die on the outside, the consciousness embarks on a completely different journey. Almost all survivors report the same thing. Instead of the icy cold, they begin to feel a pleasant, radiating warmth. One woman, rescued after several hours trapped in the snow, described feeling as if she were lying by a fireplace, wrapped in a warm blanket. Another man, a skier lost in the mountains, recalled that he stopped feeling fear and instead felt incredible euphoria and love for the world. He simply sat down in a snowdrift, smiling, confident that he was perfectly fine. This is precisely the endorphin-induced state we discussed. The struggle is over, resistance is futile, and the brain activates its final defense program, making the process of death as comfortable as possible for its host. These stories are living proof that our brain, in order to protect itself from the horror of its own death, is capable of creating a most convincing mirage. People who experienced this weren't just almost dead. They were already in the active process of dying, and what they describe as peace, warmth, and happiness were in fact symptoms of the final stages of systemic failure. They were fortunate that salvation came precisely in that brief window of time, between the onset of euphoria and the point of no return. Their testimony is invaluable because it allows us to see this tragedy through the eyes of the victim. Now we have all the pieces of the puzzle: a furious battle, chemical deception, a fiery surge, a primal instinct, and, finally, the voices of those who returned. It's time to put them together. It's time to reconstruct, step by step, the final moments of a freezing man's life, to see what this easy and serene passing truly looked like. All the pieces of the puzzle are before us. Scientific facts, forensic reports, survivor testimonies. It's time to put them all together. Let's put theories aside for a few moments and imagine this isn't some hypothetical person. It's you. You're lost. Hours of desperate struggle are behind you. The excruciating, uncontrollable trembling that shook your body and burned away your last strength has finally stopped. The sharp, icy pain in your muscles and joints that made you want to scream is simply gone. Chaos and panic have been replaced by deafening silence, and with it, warmth. A wonderful, blissful warmth that begins somewhere deep in your chest and slowly spreads throughout your entire body. There's no longer any fear, no longer any desire to fight. There's only an all-consuming fatigue and a single, simple, and clear desire: to sleep. You think you found the perfect place to rest. The snow around you feels like a soft featherbed. The world is beautiful in its white silence. This is the very moment that survivors talk about. A moment of peace and euphoria. You close your eyes, ready to surrender completely to this sweet peace. But at that very second, your dying brain makes its final, most insane move. At first, you feel a faint, tingling sensation on your skin, and then, without warning, a wave of searing heat pierces you. It's not the warmth of a moment ago. It's a tsunami of fire coming from within. Your blood boils, your skin burns as if touched by a red-hot iron. Panic returns. But now it's the panic of a being burning alive, not of someone freezing. Your mind, incapable of analysis, receives a single, monstrously clear impulse. Fire! And instinct screams, "Take it off." Your clothes, your only protector, in this mirage become a source of unbearable torture. You tear off your jacket, your sweater, anything you can reach without feeling the icy air. For you, the cold no longer exists. There is only the flame, and you must get rid of it. The fire recedes as suddenly as it came, leaving behind only the ashes of your consciousness. Your personality, your memories, yourself, all dissolved in this final tide. All that remains is an ancient animalistic reflex, millions of years old. This reflex compels you to move, to crawl, to seek shelter, not to keep warm, but to hide. You duck under the low branches of a spruce tree, burrow into a snowdrift, squeeze into any crevice you can find. You construct your final burrow, and then everything goes silent. And here it is, the end. To the rescuer who finds you in a few hours or days, the scene will look deceptively peaceful. A quiet, motionless body in a secluded spot. A serene face, frozen in an expression of peace. The very illusion we began with. But now we know what a furious, surreal, and tragic spectacle unfolded behind the scenes of this silence. We've traveled this entire path, from serene myth to brutal reconstruction. We've seen the fury of battle, the chemistry of deception, and the primal instincts hidden in the depths of our brains. It's time to return to the question that began it all. Why is death by cold considered easy? The answer is both simple and complex. It's considered so because we confuse the agonizing process of dying with the final subjective sensation at the moment of death. We see only the final frame of this tragedy, not the entire film. Two parallel realities exist. The first is objective, physical death. A long, grueling agony filled with pain, fear, and a desperate struggle for life. There's nothing easy in this reality. But there's also a second reality, a psychological one. This is the mirage the brain creates for its host when the battle is already lost. And in this second reality, thanks to the powerful anesthesia of endorphins, there truly is no pain or fear. There is only peace, warmth, and the desire to sleep. The myth is born because the victim's appearance, a serene face, a relaxed posture, completely corresponds to their final inner feelings. Could this final act of nature's mercy be called so? Yes. But it's an extremely cruel mercy. Mercy lies in the fact that our own biology seems to have a built-in defense mechanism against the unbearable horror of death. The brain, realizing that the end is inevitable, shuts down its pain and fear receptors, allowing consciousness to fade in a state of peace rather than agony. It's as if it were saying, "You've done all you could. Now rest." This is the final anesthesia the system injects into itself. But the cruelty of this mercy lies in its price. This peace is not a gift, but a symptom of the complete and utter failure of all systems. It's a comfort that makes you make fatal mistakes, to drop your last defenses in response to the false heat and burrow into your own grave, obeying a primal instinct. It's a kindness that kills, a comfort that guarantees death. This is the main, darkest paradox of hypothermia. So is this death easy? If by easy we mean the absence of struggle and suffering throughout the entire journey, then definitely not. As we've discovered, this is one of the most painful and lengthy ways to die. But if we're talking about the last conscious, or rather already unconscious, sensation, then yes. In this very specific sense, it is truly easier than many other types of death, because the victim is essentially not present at their own end. Their consciousness is already in another illusory reality, carefully created by their own brain. They die believing they are simply falling asleep in warmth and comfort. This entire story is more than just a collection of shocking medical facts. It is a powerful reminder of what our brain is capable of and how fragile the line between reality and our perceptions is. But what is the most important lesson we should take from this chilling journey to the edge of life and death? The myth of an easy death from cold isn't just a misconception. It's dangerous because it trivializes a real threat, making us forget that a serene winter landscape isn't just beautiful, but also a force of immense, indifferent power. Our journey into the heart of this force revealed that nature is neither good nor evil. It simply follows its own immutable laws. But the main lesson of this story isn't even about nature. It's about us. It's about how the greatest and most unpredictable mystifier, capable of the most incredible illusions, resides within our own heads. Therefore, the main lesson written in the snow is a lesson in the deepest respect. Respect for the power of nature, which we must never underestimate. And respect for our own bodies, this incredibly complex and fragile mechanism that, until its last breath, desperately fights for life and tries to protect us, even from the horror of our own end.